The next item on our agenda is to discuss the possibility of reopening the budget.
Can I open the discussion on reopening the budget?
Sure. Please.
I like the way this is worded on the agenda because it says discussion regarding reopening the budget. And I'm going to preface my remarks by saying that as a member of the Finance Committee, I don't want to reopen the budget of the borough. But people should know that at reorganization meetings, it is the right of the new council to reopen the budget and to, the budget that was adopted and created by the previous council. And in my mind, the reasons, we did that 2 years ago. In my mind, the reasons for doing that would be, if the new council felt that we could alter the tax structure, perhaps do a tax cut or raise taxes, neither of which I believe, based upon our budget that we have, that we could afford to do. Second reason would be to alter the expense side of the budget. Perhaps a major initiative that wanted to be enacted to put monies in the budget to do that, or to take things out. That being said, I have said at our December 8th meeting when we adopted the budget, I thought that Pat and Bob and Finance Committee did a good job putting this budget together, and I think it holds up in difficult economic times. The only reason I would want to open the budget is on the expense side of things. There's two expenses in the budget that I'm concerned about. And, one is the donation to the Newtown Corporation for 2010. And the other is the capital expenditure we have in there for surveillance cameras that was voted on in a series of votes by the last council. Both of those expenses give me pause to move forward with this budget, and I know I have my budget book, there may be other ways to allay my fears, but I do think that that would be the only reason I would want to reopen the budget, to address some of those two expense items that I have issues with at this point.
Gerard, Julie, I'm prepared to make a motion with respect to the surveillance cameras if Julie, you believe now is the time. To its great credit, the previous council had held a number of public meetings addressing the issue of surveillance cameras in this community, most notably on November 17th over at the Presbyterian Church. I attended that meeting and took notes. 25 people spoke at that meeting. 17 spoke generally against the concept of surveillance cameras on the streets and in our parks. 7 spoke generally for, and 1 said, you folks argue about it. There were a number of reasons on both sides, and in fact I'd say all sides. Good, thoughtful reasons, and it was a good public discussion and public debate. But having walked around town, having spoken with a number of people, I think those percentages, 17-7-1, pretty well reflect the will of the people in this town. I think the Courier-Times editorial that most of us have read really hit the nail on the head. There were a number of arguments against the concept of cameras on our streets and in our parks. With me, it begins and ends with the constitutional elements. The First Amendment provides that Congress, and it's made applicable to the states through the 14th Amendment, shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the freedom of peaceable assembly. The Fourth Amendment ensures the security of people and their persons, papers, and effects, except upon probable cause. And it begins and ends there, as far as I'm concerned, with respect to the cameras in the streets and in the parks. I believe it was Gerard said at the meeting in the summer, I'm going to paraphrase it in a moment. I realize that many courts have found in favor of generalized surveillance networks in many towns. I think generally those are places where there's a high crime rate. We're fortunate not to have that. So can we constitutionally, by the letter of the law, put cameras in our streets and our parks? We probably can, but I think it was Gerard that said that we can doesn't mean we should. And absent a true risk of serious crime, bodily injury, death, major felonies. I don't think this council should abridge the rights of freedom of speech, of peaceable assembly, and of the security of persons in their persons and papers and effects. So I'm prepared to make a motion that the action of the prior council, I'm going to break this into two motions. First, that the action of the prior council, by a 3-3 vote broken by the mayor, providing for the purchase and installation of a surveillance camera at Linton Park be reversed, and that there be no purchase, installation, or operation of surveillance cameras in the parks or on the streets of the borough.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Yes, I don't know how we go from a discussion on opening up the budget to a motion to remove the camera proposal without the benefit of the public being advised that this is going to be discussed this evening. While I do not choose to challenge Perry's comments, I think the cameras have been an open forum in the past, and I think it's an inappropriate discussion at this meeting this evening. The one element, Gerard, that you probably forgot about, and that is with respect to opening up the budget, one of the elements is materiality of change. And we really don't have to open up our budget unless there's a 10% swing in either expenses or revenues. So the mere fact that the Newtown Corporation contribution is in the budget, and the mere fact that we have funds allocated in the budget for surveillance safety cameras doesn't necessitate opening up the budget, and I don't feel it necessitates having a discussion about the cameras this evening, because I think it's inappropriate at this time. I'm not saying we shouldn't have the discussion, but it is not relevant in my mind to make this decision this evening as it relates to the budget, because if we removed the $3,000 or the $2,000, whatever the dollar amount is, it is not material to the overall scope of the budget. And this council, next week, next month, can stop funding for anything it wants. It can stop funding for the Newtown Corporation, next month. It can stop funding for the cameras next month. And I think it's, from a point of order standpoint, I think this is out of order. I think we need to get back to discussing whether or not we want to open up the budget.
Let me speak to that, if I may. First, as to reopening the budget, I think I took Gerard's remarks a little differently, and that was he was recognizing the option of opening up the budget, but in the end thought that would not be necessary. I don't want to speak for you. That's up to you. And what you just said, Bob, is correct. The money's in there. You choose not to spend it, which brings me to my second point, and I think that's why the motion just made is probably very appropriate, and that is that tonight is the first opportunity for a new council and a new majority to take a position on something which was previously approved by the last council. The danger in not acting on this is to perhaps, shall we say, have a misunderstanding that money could be expended, time spent, and services rendered going forward from tonight when this council doesn't want that to happen. So as an alternative to reopening the budget and going through that process and readopting by February 15th with all the advertising costs and holding another hearing, as an alternative to that is a motion just presented. So I think whether or not it's brought up under reopening the budget or it's brought up under other business, it's entirely appropriate tonight. In fact, I think it's necessary tonight if the sentiment of this council is to reverse that prior action, which is exactly what that motion said. My last point on the public hearing on this is very simply, there were many meetings on this last year. In fact, this is probably without precedent in the last several years, a subject that has received tremendous discussion, debate, and really some excellent arguments from both sides. I think the people who spoke from the heart, spoke from their research, and in the end presented Newtown Borough at its finest in terms of talking about something that is very close to what people think this town should be. Either way. But it's been talked about. Decision was made last year, and what is being done this evening is this council's action, or not, because a vote hasn't been taken, to reverse that. And if this motion fails, we go forward with that last action in place. But if this motion passes unequivocally, without any question, action will stop in terms of any public surveillance component. So I welcome the motion, I seconded it, and I hope it is a successful vote this evening.